I've often wondered exactly how many property investors there are in Australia. Because I don't know if it's just me, but if you listen to the media, you'd swear that every man, woman, child, their dog and their cat had 23 investment properties each. But I wasn't too sure if that was actually the case. So what I did was I dove into the ATO data to actually dig up how many people were claiming investment properties on their income tax returns. So stick around and we'll dive into the numbers. So a little bit of background, a bit of context. In order to figure out or put it in perspective, I needed to know the population of Australia. So I've assumed that it's 24 million or thereabouts. And the reason I assume that is because that's the number that Google told me when I Googled the question, how many people live in Australia? Now, in terms of total property investors, the ATO data suggests, or it says, that there's around 2 million property investors, which is 8.7% of the population. What that means is that less than 1 in 10 actually own an investment property. Now, you may be thinking, oh, but I bet you a whole heap of those people own more than one. Well, let's take a look at that. Well, let's see how many people actually own how many investment properties. So the total number of people that own one investment property and one investment property only is around 1.5 million. That is around 6.2% of the total population. And if you think about it, that's also 71% of the total amount of investors. So what that means is that 71% of property investors get stuck or stop at one investment property. What about two? What about two properties? Well, the amount of investors is just less than 400,000, and that is equal to 1.6% of the population. So what about three? Well, it's about 120,000, and the percentage is getting even lower. This time, it's 0.5%, 0.5% of Australians have three investment properties. Now the numbers get really small. So the total amount of Australians that own 4 investment properties is around 45,000. That's only 0.19% of the population. 5 is just less than 19,000, and that's 0.07% of the population. Now when it comes to 6, it goes up slightly. It's just below 20,000, which is equal to 0.08% of the population. So just to recap, you can see that less than 10% of Australians, less than 1 in 10 people own an investment property. So it's not as widespread as the media would make out to be. And the other startling statistic that I came across was that 71% of investors either stop or get stuck at one investment property, which to me suggests that you really need to get that first property purchase right. Otherwise you're going to get stuck or you're going to stop. So without a method or a framework that's going to help you build a portfolio, you may struggle because 71% of property investors seem to be struggling. So a word of warning, this data is pulled from the ATO for individual tax returns. I don't think it includes any property investors that invest through a company, through a trust or any other separate legal entities. That might skew the figures a bit. But I don't think there's going to be some wild numbers or massive numbers that invest that way. So we can assume that for the most people, they're going to be interested in the individuals that are investing in property. So there you have it. That's the total amount and a bit of a breakdown of the property investors here in Australia. And until next time, stay classy.